Welcome back to the channel, guys. It's your fitness, nutrition, and lifestyle coach, Rody Cardona here. In today's video, we're going to be talking about muscular imbalances, how to treat them, and what to do to prevent them in the first place. Quick disclaimer here, the information in this video is for educational purposes only. So muscular imbalances could be caused for a couple of different reasons. The main reason could be pain, and if you do feel pain when you're doing an exercise, then I would recommend just going to go see a physiotherapist or your doctor before moving forward with anything. If there is no pain associated with it, it could be that you're compensating. So you could see compensation in an exercise like a bipedal exercise. For example, something like a squat, you would typically see some type of compensation where the hip moves over to one side. So you could see something like this would be a typical compensation pattern. You can also see it in unilateral exercises. For example, if you're doing a single dumbbell row, the way you pull on the left arm versus the right arm could look different. And the reason why this happens could be for multiple reasons. Some of the reasons can include, but it's not limited to the following. So like I previously said, it could be because of pain, in which case you probably should stop working out. It could be because maybe you had an injury in that area. It could be because maybe one side is stronger to the other, so you're going to favor, in the case of a squat, you're going to favor your stronger side. It could be because there's a deficit in your flexibility. For example, in a squat, the less flexible hip you'll favor the less flexible hip, and you'll allow more flexibility to be expressed on the one side. So your body will go through the path of least resistance. Also, this one ties into having a previous history of injury in that particular part of your body. Not only will you allow compensation to happen, but if you don't fix the compensation, then your movement pattern becomes that of compensation. And if it's something that you haven't addressed previously and it's been reinforced throughout the years by repeating the movement in, I think that's a word, compensatory way, this could lead to you just doing an exercise in a dysfunctional manner without you even really realizing it until somebody points it out to you. Addressing a strength deficit from left to right is probably one of the easier things to fix. It's very simple. You could start doing some unilateral work, but sometimes it's not necessary. It kind of really depends, because unilateral exercises can be done in a dysfunctional way. So if you're doing a single arm bent over row, you can do the left side differently versus the right side. So just because you're doing a unilateral exercise doesn't mean that you're doing it perfectly uniformly. So you have to kind of be careful with that, the way you set it up. Sometimes it makes more sense to use a machine to try to force one side to do the same amount of weight as the other side. And typically when there's a strength deficit, we want to let the weak side dictate the load. If you could only do 20 pounds on the left side, but the right side could do 25 pounds, we're gonna do 20 pounds until the left side and the right side are even. A muscular imbalance caused by a strength deficit is probably one of the easier things to fix, and in which case you would just use a unilateral exercise. But you wouldn't ignore exercises where you're using both arms to perform the exercise. You just kind of want to be aware that you're pulling as evenly as you possibly can in terms of force applied to the object that you're trying to move, in terms of trajectory of movement, your movement mechanics. Sometimes it's going to look different left to right, but I'll kind of talk about that a little bit further down in this video. One of the other reasons that I mentioned that could lead to a muscular imbalance is if you have a flexibility or a mobility deficit in one joint versus the other. So if you're squatting and you notice that your hips will favor one side versus the other, and the way we could fix this could be a couple of different ways. You wrap a band around the hips when you're squatting, and you actually pull the body more into the dysfunction, because that will allow your body to have a reminder to push against the band, putting you in line. So this is one way of doing it. Another way of doing it could be using a unilateral exercise like a split squat. And the reason why I would pick the split squat is because the split squat's going to give you a lot of bang for your buck. It's going to help you fix your flexibility or your mobility through the hips, but it's also going to build strength, which is going to be essential for you to fix this dysfunction. Although there is a caveat here, There are times where you probably won't want to fix muscular imbalance, and the hip is a great example of this because the hip joint from left to right, the position of that hip joint might be slightly different, right? So maybe the right hip joint is slightly more forward than the left one. So your legs might look slightly different when you squat left to right, so you don't have to be perfectly symmetrical. In this instance, if there is no pain being caused and there's no strength deficit from left to right, so if you do like a split squat and you could lift the same amount of weight on both sides, I wouldn't worry too much about it because of this specific thing. There's nothing you could do to fix that if it's a structural issue. Going back to this mobility deficit, if it's not a structural issue and it is a mobility deficit, then we can totally fix it using something like a split squat, which is a unilateral exercise. It not only work on your flexibility at the end range of motion, but it's also going to help build strength. And then when you retest with your regular squat, you should notice that your squat is no longer being lopsided. You're not favoring one side versus the other. But I do think that you also need to repattern it. So that's where the exercise that I previously talked about, where you use a band that actually pulls you into the dysfunction more, is going to rewire your brain to fight against this. That way you could squat in a more uniform way. My final point here, which actually ties in really nicely to a mobility deficit or flexibility deficit that I previously talked about, is the length-tension relationship in any specific joint. So let's use the shoulder, for example. If the muscles in the front of your shoulder are going to be super tight, it's going to pull your shoulder forward. And then particularly if the muscles in the back of the shoulder are very weak, so they're going to be in a lengthened position. But with that, we have an imbalance within the same joint. So the imbalance doesn't have to necessarily be from left side to right side. It could all be in the same joint. So that would be a muscular imbalance that's happening in one specific joint, which is actually takes the joint out of its centered position, which would be like the ideal position that you want that shoulder joint to be in, for injury prevention, to increase your performance, right? Like if you have your joints are nice and centered, we don't have a muscular imbalance, you'll be able to perform better and hopefully be injury free. Although when it comes to injuries, sometimes you could get injured in this, not necessarily because of a muscular imbalance. It could be for multiple different reasons. That's something best left for a different video. With this being said, when do you actually want to fix your muscular imbalance? I would say that you want to fix your muscular imbalance specifically if you have pain associated with this muscular imbalance left to right or in the same joint. With any of your movements or just your day-to-day life, you know for a fact that the muscular imbalance is due to muscular tightness or weakness. That's when we want to fix it. And lastly, if it's impairing your performance, whether that's inside of the gym or outside of the gym in day-to-day life, these are the three reasons why I would say you would need to fix a muscular imbalance. And lastly, why you would not want to fix it. That would be is if the muscular imbalance just has to do with the way your joints are set up from left to right. No one is going to be perfectly symmetrical. There are going to be some differences from your left side to your right side, so that's important to know. Trying to attain perfect symmetry from left to right is really a waste of time because you'll never be able to attain that. Some people are close. Some people have more imbalances than other asymmetries, I think is the word, more asymmetries. I don't know what the word is. They're more uneven from left to right. And if you know it's structural, you don't really want to touch it. If you have no pain associated with it, if it's not impeding your performance, if you're getting stronger week to week, then these are reasons why you would not want to fix it. You know, there's people that say that you need to avoid all muscular imbalances at all costs because it could potentially lead to an injury down the road. Maybe not. Injuries are multifactorial. Multiple reasons are what causes an injury. It's not one specific thing. So for somebody to say that this muscular imbalance you might or might not have is going to lead to an injury down the road, no one could really say that with 100% certainty, particularly if there's no pain associated. If you can move through your range of motion with no pain whatsoever, you have a good range of motion, you have pretty good form overall, then I would say it's nothing to worry about, and really just worry about it when it happens. If you found this information valuable, then I would recommend watching this video up here, and I'll see you right here in the next video.